Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Why Can't We Build as Fast as the Empire State Building, a special live event brought to you by the B1M in partnership with Buildots. I'm Fred Mills. I'm the founder, face, and voice of the B1M. I'm going to be your host for today. And luckily, I'm joined by some fantastic experts from across the construction industry who we're going to meet in just a moment. Now, if you've followed me or the B1M for any more than about 5 minutes, you'll know that I absolutely love New York skyscrapers, and I could easily talk about this topic for 3 days. They're not going to let me do that. We have to keep it to 60 minutes today, I'm afraid. We're going to start off with a bit of an intro from our panelists. We're going to meet them and hear about their backgrounds. We're then going to hear some history and context around the Empire State Building with some fantastic images and artifacts from Carol. We're then going to dive into a prepared Q&A just to make sure you guys get some of the key messages from today and that you hear some of the key points that I think are important to get across around this story. We're then going to go into an open Q&A, and we want to hear from as many of you as possible within that. So please do get your questions and comments coming in. There's two features on Zoom. There's a chat feature and a Q&A feature. Please feel free to chat away, chat to us in the chat feature. That's not a problem at all. But if you could keep the Q&A just to questions and get all your questions coming into the Q&A, that will enable us to answer as many of them as possible and basically do you guys a better service. If for any reason we can't get through all the questions, we will endeavour to answer you over email after this event. But without further ado, let's get going. We're going to start off by meeting our panelists. And first of all, coming to Carol Willis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Willis. I'm the founder and director of the Skyscraper Museum, which is in Lower Manhattan. We've been there since 2004, and I'm an architectural historian. So I'm going to be putting the Empire State's construction into a historical context in New York and compared to other skyscrapers in history a little bit.
Fantastic. It's great to have you with us, Carol. Andy?
Good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, Andy Steele. I'm going to coin a phrase that Fred knows well. I love construction and I want the whole world to do so too. What does that mean? Basically, I work with businesses who are really trying to move the industry forward, to improve it and to make change. That's building on my background as being a chief exec of a construction-based company, which had construction infrastructure developments, property maintenance, and even an offsite manufacturing company. And on top of that, I was chair of Build UK, the largest trade body in the UK. Fantastic.
Great to be with us, Andy. Aviv?
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks, Fred. Aviv Leibovici. I am the co-founder, or one of the co-founders, and the chief of product at Buildots. So I will be sort of in this discussion from my perspective of how can technology be used to help the processes and to deliver something maybe not as quick as the Empire State, but maybe getting there.
Fantastic. And last but no means least, Tom.
Hi everyone. Yeah, Tom Hooper-Smith. I'm a project director for Waits Residential, working in and around central London.
Fantastic. Well, we've got, as I said, guys, an awesome panel today to help us really dig into and interrogate this topic. We've got representatives from the Skyscraper Museum, we've got strategic construction, we've got technology, we've got project directors. Honestly, I'm not just saying it because it's my webinar. Couldn't think of a better panel to talk about this topic with, so we're going to get into it shortly. A little bit more background for you. We've got an article, Why Can't We Build as Fast as the Empire State Building, up now over on the b1m.com with some fantastic kind of facts and images that really gives a basic overview of this. It doesn't come close to Carol's book or the Skyscraper Museum, which we're going to hear about in a minute, but it's a good briefer. Also, over on the B1M, we may have a B1M New York skyscraper video or two up there over the years. Lots and lots of content, including this video, which we've got up on one side there, all about why New York's skyscrapers keep changing shape. Really dives into the history of the New York skyscraper and explores how what happens in that city is reflected in its skyscrapers and how those skyscrapers then go on to become silent influences of its future. Really good story we did at Christmas. 30 minutes long. I think it's got just under 2 million views now. It also stars Carol Willis, and I'm pretty sure most of those views came from her expertise in that video. So do go and check that one out. And pretty much any big New York skyscraper out there, we will have done a video on it. I'm pretty confident in saying that. So do go and check them out for free over on our YouTube channel. Now, without further ado, we're going to pass over to Carol, who's going to take us through the history of the Empire State Building. Hopefully you can share your screen now, Carol.
Yes, here we go. Well, I have to say thank you very much, Fred, for inviting me to be here and to talk about my favorite skyscraper. I'll add that if you want to know about the history of New York skyscrapers, or indeed international skyscrapers, go to the Skyscraper Museum's website, where all of our past exhibitions for these last 20 years almost that we've been open in our home in Battery Park City in Lower Manhattan are archived on our website and are available. And one of the special features of our website, with regard to the construction of the Empire State Building, I'll show you some slides of and the link in a moment. But by way of introducing myself, this is the cover of the book that we did back way in 1998 called Building the Empire State, that I edited and added an essay to, as did my co-author there, Don Friedman, and I'll show you his name again later, because he really is the expert on the construction management at the Empire State Building and across construction history, because he himself is a structural engineer who's written a great deal about numerous books on construction history. But this is part of the cover of the book that we did, in the back cover that shows you one of the photographs from a notebook that we got from Sterrett Brothers and Eakin, the construction managers, actually the builders of the Empire State Building, as they would have called themselves. And as you can see on the back cover, we put the kind of tag phrase, constructed in 11 months, the 1,252-foot Empire State Building was a marvel of modern engineering. The frame rose at the average of more than a story a day. And that was an incredible feat of construction, but especially of construction management. And so I want to give you a little taste of the history of the building, but through the photographs from the perspective of the builders, Sterrett Brothers and Eakin. Almost all the photographs that you see here are from their notebooks, which are in the collection of the Skyscraper Museum. So here in this kind of iconic under construction view of the building going straight up, you see the staging of the work and the pacemakers, as the Sterretts called them, of finishing the facade, keeping the steel frame going up, keeping the window framing and fenestration on the rise, even as the lower floors are being completed. And then the interiors in the lower floors are also apace as the building rises. So a few other of those images make clear that order and the logic of their construction. These are all small photographs that are about 2¼ inches by 4½ inches, but they monumentalize very nicely. So here are a few, but here is really the meat of the book, Building the Empire State, which is still available. It's still in print and it's easily available. You order it online. The main part of that book is this typescript manuscript, a unique manuscript, even if there were copies somewhere else. We have the original that records in some 77 pages, I think, the organization of the work. And one of the snapshots of the work are what I'm going to show you here, just 2 pages that are the beginning and the end. I'll show you the middle later, of a job diary for a single day on the construction site. But it was the single day in, I think, August 14th, 1930, which was the peak of construction during the summer of 1930. And there were more than 3,400 men at work on the site. So that they are tallied up in this last page of the job diary. And we'll look at that later, but that's what really the book, Building the Empire State, is about. It's the builder's account of how they managed the work. And here they are, the heroes of my story and our story today, who were the Sterrett brothers, who were the top two, Paul and Colonel William A. Sterrett, who people call Bill Sterrett, and A.J. Eakin, their partner. There were multiple Sterrett brothers, all in the construction industry or builders, and then the head of the Empire State Building's construction, Hunter. And here, as a consequence of doing the book in 1998 and publicizing also on our website, what is called the notebook, or we call the notebook, which became the book Building the Empire State. We received from a descendant of the Sterrett family what is the album of photographs, same size photographs, but over 500 photographs instead of under 80 photographs in the notebook. And so we expanded these, and these are what are now available on the museum's website. So this is the actual album and a page of it when it was on display in the museum. And you'll be seeing, this is the cover sheet of the title of what is literally a leather-bound scrapbook that has a bow that's holding everything together. They titled it Erection Views of the Empire State Building. And on our website, where you see the link here, we called it Empire State Building Construction Stare at Scrapbook for perhaps obvious online search reasons. So pages of the notebook I'll show you in order to capture some of the range of the photographic record that they created and organized in this book, which, as you can see, is labeled with the number of the photograph, but also a description of the work, hand labeled in white ink on this black construction board. So what most people think about when documentaries make documentary filmmakers make stories of the construction of the Empire State is the Steele, right? The Sky Boys riding the derrick and the Steele rising into the sky. And that's in this notebook too. And you see some of a few of the many photographs that we have, and you can see on our website. But what I want to talk about in terms of the pace of the work is to take an example of the construction management and why it made the speedy construction and incredibly efficient construction of the Empire State Building possible. And it's really the fenestration, the curtain wall, the windows, and the kind of erector set elements of standardization that the Starretts brought to the site, but were built into the design process. And so I'm going to go a little bit into the history of the design of the Empire State Building too, very, very briefly, and you can find much more in the books and on our website about this. But if we just take this, the topless Empire State Building in the drawing by Shreve, Lamb, and Harmon, architects of the Empire State Building, you can see the building to the top of where you would walk out onto the observation deck. So absent the mooring mast, which was a later addition to the design. Design started in September 1929. They thought of the mooring mast and added it in November. In general, people that tend to focus on the height of the Empire State Building. And, not surprisingly, it was the tallest building in the world in 1931 when it was finished, and until the 1970s, World Trade Center and Sears Tower. So the Empire State was the biggest building in the world in terms of the volume of floor space that was being enclosed. And that's a point that I want to keep making. But, who designed the Empire State Building? Well, the architects of the Empire State Building are here. Shreve, his name is actually, it's wrong here, Richmond Shreve, and Shreve, Lamb, and Harmon. And of those three partners, the key design partner was William Lamb, who you see in the middle of the image. But I wouldn't really call him the architect of the Empire State, because he didn't conceive it as an artistic form-making gesture. He's part of a kind of system of building commercial architecture in New York that has multiple factors that I described in a book that I'd written about the same time as we published this, called Form Follows Finance. And that is not to say that money and finance are the only things that shape skyscrapers, but you certainly can't tell their story without thinking about that. So it's not that I underplay architects. I love architects, but in this particular case, I want to emphasize that the design, the shaping of the Empire State Building, which was a commercial building meant to rent space to make money. Of course, it failed to do that during the Depression when it was completed, but I will show you some floor plans. The part of the driving force, the origin of the driving force of these buildings are the businessmen who create them, the entrepreneurs, in this case, the tycoons of American industry, Pierre S. DuPont, and in the upper right-hand corner, John Jacob Raskob, in the upper left-hand corner, Raskob in the lower right-hand corner, and their bankers are also in this picture, which is from a dedicatory book that was published in 1931 about the Empire State Building. So I would call this, and I have called in Foreign Fellows Finance, the first blueprint of the Empire State Building, which is just it came in a letter between Raskob and his banker to say, we're thinking of building a building. They had purchased the site on Fifth Avenue between 33rd and 34th Street. They had to tear down the Waldorf Astoria, and they were going to put up a commercial building. They had a pro forma, which is this one page here of calculations that compared a 55-story building to an 80-story building. And after all the calculations of expense and projected return, they concluded that they would build an 80-story building. And that is, that piece of paper I would take as the first blueprint for the decision to build the Empire State, and then to expand it into the world's tallest building. Now, even before Shreve, Lamb and Harmon were hired to become the architects, and they had been the designers for a building on the same site, so they kind of inherited the project for somewhat complicated reasons. Even before they designed that building, Richmond Shreve had been one of the authors of this book, published in 1929. So it had already been written and it was published in 1929 before they got the job for the Empire State Building, called, it was like an industry book, a how-to book, The Skyscraper, A Study of Its Economic Height. And one of the plates in the book shows you a skyscraper on a large site in Manhattan, a full block of the cross streets, like 33rd to 34th, which is 200 feet wide. And Empire State Building is a little more than 400 feet in its breadth. What this diagram shows you is the return on investment for a building in slices that you see there, all buildings combined here. So that if you stop at whatever the 7th story, and all, you can read it there. You stop at those number of stories. There was a chart calculation to show you what would be the return on investment, like that first letter, 55 stories versus 80 stories, for taking into consideration, all of the multiples of Foreign Fellows Finance, and it concluded that for a generic skyscraper in the middle of Manhattan, probably 65 or 71 stories is the optimal return on the money that you're going to invest, because that is the measurement, the return on investment. And whatever that height is the economic height of the building. The economic height of the building for the Empire State was 80 stories. They made it 86 stories, adding the observation deck, and to reach a competitive height with the Chrysler Building and the other skyscrapers being built at the time. And then they added that 200 feet of insurance policy to be the world's tallest building. So I think you can see how close the Empire State Building's design is to the diagram that Shreve created in order to illustrate for people what would be, how can you make the most money back in percentages on the amount of money that you're going to spend to borrow, to construct, to market an office building. So I will continue to go very quickly and just make quick reference to what you see in the center of the image, the importance of light in the floor plan. That was one of the determinants of design, because buildings were illuminated, workspace was illuminated principally by daylight up until the introduction of fluorescent lights, basically in the post-war 1940s and 50s era in the US. And what you see at the very bottom, it says, from this advertisement in a newspaper, ready for occupancy on May 1st, 1931. And I won't go into all 5 of the program descriptions, the kind of 5 elements of the program that William Lamb articulated in an article that he wrote in the 30s. But the last one of the 5 is a completion date by May 1st, 1931, which was, as he says, which meant 1 year and 6 months from the beginning of the sketches. And this is the beginning of the sketch of the final sketch as they determined the shape of the Empire State. There's not time to go into how it was shaped, how it was pulled back from from the street above the first six-story height. But I direct you to the ground floor plan that you see there, which covers nearly 2 acres. Here you see it more closely. You see how much of the center of the space is occupied by the elevator banks. And then as what we call the Tower of Plans, which is the thin band over on the left, where you can see sections, you can see floor plans through various sections of the building. You can see one of the other determinants connected to the importance of light, the primacy of light in the design of skyscrapers, which is, as Lamb said, no space more than 28 feet from an outside window to an interior corridor. So as the elevator banks fall away, as they need to service fewer floors at the very top, that's part of the area in the exterior form where you see the setbacks. And as you can see in just these couple of examples, this perimeter of space remains consistent throughout, never more than 28 feet from outside window to interior corridor, which was a definition of Class A office space in the 1930s. And by contrast, this is the floor plan of the Sears Tower, now Willis Tower. It's 225 feet on a side square. As I said, the Empire State Building is 200 feet. So basically, the footprint of the Empire State Building is almost twice as big as the Sears Tower. So I mentioned my co-author or co-essayist to frame the book, Building the Empire State, and that's the structural engineer Donald Friedman, and expert on construction history. And so his essay, which I certainly commend to you, is a quote from the Starrett's A Story a Day and Engineering the Work. In our typescript, can't see this here, but you can see it in the book, is the organization chart for the construction. In our notebook are photographs of some of the guys whose names are on that chart. The process of work entailed first demolishing the Victorian Hotel, one of the largest hotel almost in the world, but one of the biggest in New York at the time, the Waldorf Astoria. And you see it in its older section and its newer steel frame section coming down. That started in September of 1929. They excavated the site so they could have the sub-levels. They organized the work from the builder's bungalow that you see right on 34th Street, so a very busy urban street. Down in the site, you see the workers putting the concrete onto the grillages that are the footings for the great columns, which you can also see there in this vast site. And you see the Fifth Avenue and 34th Street with all of its traffic still bustling along and people shopping across the street. You see the tower rising, and here I want to focus very quickly on the organization of building the curtain wall, a limestone aluminum spandrel panel, steel mullions, and then inset window panes, which form a true curtain wall because it's carried on the frame at the Empire State Building, and not built in brick like the Chrysler Building, for example, from a scaffolding outside of the frame, a very inefficient and time-consuming way to build in the 1930s that was very common in skyscrapers. So the organization of systematizing the facade came at the very beginning with the cooperation of the architects and the builder. So Shreve, Lamb and Harmon, also the engineers, but especially the Starrett brothers, so that they could together design a system that would allow them to erect the facade very quickly, as you can see these workers doing with the stainless steel mullions that are going to seal the facade, the limestone panels that are carried also on the frame, the very limited scaffolding with workers working on it, the finishing with the even lighter weight scaffolding around, and you can see up close the windows placed in the wall, the aluminum spandrels just above those. So there are continuous vertical lines of window spandrel without limestone in between. You can see how airy it is, like in that advertisement, in order to advertise the space of the office. And here you see the limestone panels waiting to be placed on the exterior. They were delivered from the inside of the building, from the elevator core onto a light rail system that was justified by the size, the sheer size of the Empire State Building with these great floors, floor areas that were sometimes like twice as much as the Chrysler Building. And you can see that made the movement of these heavy materials easier and certainly a lot more efficient, so that the material was always there where the worker needed it in the morning to complete the work of the day. Some of the workers placing the stone, and from the backside, where you can see the whole system that then gets shored up in brick that's laid by the masons from the interior. So that it was that made this a fast-paced process that you can see in the photograph rising in the summer of 1930. And here are the 5 pages of description of all of the workers by trade on the site on that one day in 1930. So more than 3,400 workers at work in a single day, this massive army of laborers that are brought all simultaneously onto the site, but all organized by trade, by floor, by process in the construction management. And those are some of those pages. So the last afterthought is the mooring mast. As I said, it ensured that the building would be 200 feet taller than any other in New York, and it was from 1931 buildings finished until in the depths, sliding into the depths of depression until 1950, when the Empire State finally became profitable. The observation deck was a revenue stream. The mooring mast design was, ostensibly designed for a blimp or a dirigible to come up and businessmen to walk down into their, business appointment from Germany or something. But it never happened. It really wasn't very serious, but it did make a glorious top to what has, I think, always been New York's signature skyscraper, in part because it stands unchallenged and almost to this day at the center of the island. It is certainly a celebration of work, as you see the topping out ceremony and the construction workers on the back cover of our book. But and I'm conclude with just these 2 images to show you the Empire State in now the history of the skyscraper as a history of ascending heights. This is a chart that we made back, I think, in 1998, and then we adapted it with Taipei 101 and the Burj Khalifa in order to show the next range of tallest buildings. So the Empire State is not huge by current standards. We did an exhibition called, show you here, Super Tall, last year at the museum, and this is on our website. And this is a timeline that goes through 58 buildings if you keep on going. But a point that I want to make about the Empire State to conclude is that the measure of their achievement, the Sterrett brothers' achievement, was that they built in the same amount of time as the Chrysler Building was built, or 40 Wall Street, the 2, quote, challengers for the record of height. The Empire State Building was twice the floor space. Together, the Chrysler Building and 40 Wall Street, if you put their office space together in one building, it would still be less than the office space of the Empire State Building. So the speed at which the Empire State Building was erected was not as in so much in the vertical as in the volume of the amount of material that was organized. And so at the Skyscraper Museum, we like to make this point that if you look at big buildings today, super talls, and we mix them up here, but we order them by the floor area that they contain, so that you can see their heights, you can see their floor plans. Very interesting always to show the floor plan compared to the height, but then by the volume of space, you can see the Empire State Building is no longer one of the biggest buildings in the world in terms of its overall scale, nor is it the tallest, but in its day, it was twice as tall as an average skyscraper. Today, we have completely different skyscraper technology, certainly construction technologies, but certainly the record of the Empire State Building stands in terms of the 11 months of the span of the construction, or the 18 months of the design to opening day, which I think is a more meaningful measure. It still stands proud in this lineup of super talls around the world.
That's remarkable, Carol. And I have to say, that level of insight has been absolutely fantastic. It's like look back on activity that was taking place 93 years ago is incredibly fantastic. These fantastic artifacts. Thank you so much for sharing them with us and for making that point about just how quick a construction project this was. I have to say, looking at it from a modern day construction perspective, some of the photos are fascinating. From a health and safety perspective, they're slightly terrifying, but but it's still, you can sort of see it's really interesting to look back and see how this project was built. I think it begs the question, which comes to the point of today's webinar, of if that record can still stand from 1930, why can't the construction industry build as fast today with all the technology we have, all the off-site prefabrication, the understanding we have about productivity, the ability we have to collaborate better than ever before in theory. Granted, things are very different from 1930, health and safety notably, as I've said, many other factors are different as well. But what we really want to get into now is, why is it that the industry today isn't as productive seemingly as it was back in 1930? I mean, Andy, coming to you first, looking at those pictures and hearing that story from Carol, what do you see as the biggest differences between construction in 1930 and 2023?
Thanks, Fred. I think we should start with recognizing how exceptional the Empire State Building was. It was a one-off. It's still a one-off. It's still phenomenal. That period of time is just unbelievably quick. I think it's 3 times quicker than the Chrysler Building. So even in its time, it was exceptional and exceptional on top of that. And then when you drill down into it, you start to understand a number of the reasons why it was quick. And then, of course, you have to look at, why are we so slow compared to it now? And you're dead right. With all the advantages that we have, why haven't we? And I think I always describe our industry as VUCA. And I won't go into the details of the whole of the VUCA bit, but one of the words I'll pick out is complex. We're a very complex industry. And I think what we've done exceptionally well over the last 90 odd years is make it more complex everywhere. So in simplicity, the opposite, we have made our industry very difficult to be able to build at speed. Primarily, I think the starting point of that, designs. Designs are by far more complicated. Legislation around design is more complicated. But the actual business model itself is vastly different. And I think that's really relating to the fact that what we've tried to do is to pass risk on to different parties. And the contractual position between all of these stakeholders is so different. The Empire State Building was so specific around collaboration, it was so advanced for its time. Everybody was focused. It had a board of directors that ran that project, which included the architect, which included the contractor, included the customer, included the engineer, and they built it as a business, equal stakeholders, all focusing on this common objective of speed, because the whole building process was designed around speed. We don't have that single point of focus on a modern building. And as I say, people are there preserving their own position within the overall project, and they're focused on what part they bring to it, rather than the collective good of bringing the whole thing together.
Absolutely. I mean, Tom, you're a project director for a major contractor. Do you agree with that? What are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing day to day on your jobs?
Yeah, I think that's covered it quite nicely. I think that obviously a lot of the designs that we see these days have far more complex systems incorporated within the builds. I think that the point around the vast amount of stakeholders that we have in the modern day project is a valid point, because with the amount of regulation change that we see now and the amount of third parties that are involved, from taking us all the way through from a sort of concept design place to actually completing the build is a huge number of moving parts to coordinate and bring together. I think the other interesting one is the sort of safety challenges. The industry's obviously made massive strides over the sort of last 30, 40 years in terms of our safety performance, and you know, decreasing the amount of people that we hurt on a yearly basis, which can only be a great thing. But with some of that comes sort of time restrictions, and some of those processes do take additional time.
Absolutely. I mean, Aviv, Buildots recently commissioned this fantastic free, freely available global study trying to look at some of these challenges and understand what it is that's holding the industry back and how they might be able to improve them. I wonder if you could share just a little bit about that for us now, just share us some insights, would be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. I think our goal was to take the data that's in our system and show how our construction projects really performing. I think we all, anyone who's involved in this industry knows that there are substantial challenges that my two co-panelists here talked about just now that cause some inefficiencies. This is not a factory that is manufacturing cars. It's not at that level of efficiency. And we saw things like the utilization of space, seeing that on an average project, in an average week, more than half of the available area is not even being worked on. It's just standing there for the week and not moving. Or we saw the fact that the inconsistency of what a particular trade does week after week is crazy. They would do 56% more or less the next week than they do this week. And then you think about everything Tom talked about and Andy about trying to coordinate. How can you coordinate something when you have 20, 30, 40, 50 businesses, each changing their output week after week, not because they're bad, not because they're lazy, but because they can't really completely succeed to coordinate with everyone else. And all this in the world where there are so many stakeholders, and it's very hard to even know what is going on, to understand what needs to be done. And that's what this study shows. It shows, if you're a pessimist, it shows all of the issues and how inefficient it is. If you're more of an optimistic person, which I am, then it shows just how much we can potentially improve. Because in that study that showed those metrics, some projects shined with very high efficiency numbers compared to the rest. Tom won't say it himself, so I'll speak in his name. But while the average utilization of space is 46%, as I said, Tom's project had 70% consistently, on average week after week. And that means that they're working on almost twice as much of the project as the average project. And if every project could do that and other things, then maybe we'd be close to the Empire State.
And to your mind, Aviv, and I want to get Andy's view on this as well, that's brought about by better understanding at granular level what's happening on your project, analyzing the data, being on top of things.
I think so. Tom and I had this discussion of what happened differently on your project that caused this. And I'm sure Tom will say it better than I will, but if I summarize it, it's collaboration and having the tools to collaborate well. And one of those tools is knowing what's going on. I think that's what we as Buildots took part in there. But it is very hard for 20, 30, 40, 50 stakeholders to agree on a plan together when nobody really knows exactly what's happening and where things stand.
Definitely. Andy, is there anything you want to add to that at all? You're about to jump in.
Sorry. Yeah, if we come back to the Empire State Building to some extent, they got everything right. They had collaboration. They had an amazingly efficient design. They had 3,400 people. They had minute-to-minute delivery of materials and equipment. They had transport systems around on the floor. All fantastic. But as I say, we've made it more complex. We can't actually see exactly what's going on each time. We go into a project meeting with supply chain partners, and we all have different views and different opinions as to how much of the work is complete, how much it isn't. And we spend more time arguing and discussing where we actually are than we actually do focusing on achieving something. So the beauty of what is available now in technology terms is that this gives us true objective information, which is a great starting point. From that, we can then start to make really good informed decisions. And therefore, yeah, we should be at a position where we can start to at least get back to the speed of that building, which would be an amazing thing in its own right. Let's match it, let alone beat it. But we're only going to do that if we start to get all of those principles aligned. And don't get me wrong, companies are out there are desperately trying to do this. Everybody wants to improve. Nobody accepts the industry as it is today. So everybody's focused on how can we improve the supply chain? How can we improve collaboration? Early engagement of the contractors. On Empire State Building, they were appointed 2 weeks or a week after the architects were appointed. You know, they were there, you know. We've only started talking about that in the last 10 years, you know. They did it 91 years ago. But what we've got now is we've got the advantage for the first time in my career of technology that actually is at the heart of what we do. The product is building. We are very good at technology in every other element, but we've never had technology and digital technology to support our core product. So I'm really excited about it.
And Tom, you're seeing some of that tech applied firsthand on your projects.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, there's a number of technologies that we utilize now, but if you look at the Buildots model around using AI to capture progress, that brings massive efficiencies for me because it gives me up-to-date information that perhaps I wouldn't have had without using that system. So if we're sat in a collaborative meeting with our supply chain or our design team trying to work through issues, very quickly we're able to look at the problem in detail and the sort of current progress. Whereas without that technology, you would be basing that information on people's opinions or perceptions of progress.
Absolutely. So it's a really good way of looking at it. Guys, we've got some fantastic questions coming into the Q&A. Please do get those coming into Q&A on Zoom. We're going to go through those in just a moment. I've got a good question, or a good couple of questions actually from the pre-prepared list that I want to save for the panelists to end with. But Carol, I guess just listening to that, I kind of want to get your insight as well, because we're building buildings today. You explained in great detail, fantastic detail, how large the Empire State Building was. We're building buildings today that are far smaller, that are sometimes 2 stories high in longer time. Is construction that much more difficult today? Is it harder to build a skyscraper in New York today than it was in 1930, or is it just kind of different?
It's certainly harder. There are layers of regulation that have been added at all levels of city oversight. And all of those are reactions to problems that were created along the way, whether problems with the labor or safety or any aspect of structural collapse, or there's just layers and layers of regulation. The workday is shorter, but the most important thing, and has been mentioned, is just the complexity of the interior of buildings today. When the Empire State Building was finished, it was common for skyscrapers not to be finished on their exterior until the floor was rented. So you got undivided. This is not divided up into office units. It's just a floor of space that still needs to be finished. So that level of completion today has much more building technology of HVAC systems and electrical and data, which is so much more complicated. So that does certainly add a layer of finish to a building that wasn't a part of this kind of erector set of the Empire State Building, which is the door is open in 1931, but then the space needs to be rented and outfitted to be completed. So on every level there are differences in the technology and the use of the building, in the municipal regulation, and just everything about the increasing value of the land and the value of time, the role of finance in lending makes skyscrapers beyond teamwork in the design or construction. It's, you know, it's a vast machine to create the machine of making money.
Yeah, we've made the world a lot more complicated, is what it is. What seems to be the running theme here. And now, coming to your questions, guys, again, get these coming in the Q&A feature on Zoom. We're going to go through as many of these as we can in the next few minutes. First up, and I think this is one for Tom and Andy, I'm afraid, guys. How much does the role of labour, how I'll rephrase this because I'm reading it out loud, but how big an impact is the labour shortage having on construction time periods today?
Tom, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so obviously I can only speak for the projects that I work on or around, and certainly over COVID and the Brexit challenges that we faced in London, labour shortages have played a massive part in impacting our programmes or slowing down. There's a huge drive within the industry at the moment to upskill people, to encourage people into the industry, because we simply haven't got enough skilled tradespeople working within the industry.
Yeah, just following on from that. I mean, it's a phenomenal industry. It's you know, that there are millions of people employed across the world. Is typically what 6-7% of GDP for most established countries. But it's an industry that has struggled over the last 20-30 years to attract the right caliber and capabilities of people into it. It has a bit of a poor reputation in that regard. Long hours, traveling, well-being, all those things. It's big priority for the industry, for governments around the world. It's such an important industry, as I say, to the wealth of every country, and it impacts everything we do in life. So we've got to find a way of attracting people into this amazing industry. As I say, you know, literally yesterday, UK-based only, obviously, but Construction Leadership Council here were talking about how do we attract people, continue to attract people, apprentices, get them in, because it does have that impact. So it's not only the quantity, it's the quality that we need to attract.
I couldn't agree more. Questions come in from Chris that says, I'm going to kind of reword this and paraphrase it a bit, but basically, do you think we get enough time pre-contract in the pre-construction phase now to adequately design and plan our buildings? And then he's asked, how long did the engineers and architects have on the Empire State Building? So I'm going to ask kind of, again, Andy and Tom, sorry guys, but you're the construction on the ground guys, to start us off. Do you want more time pre-contract?
Personally, yes, I'd love more time. I think that the world in which we live in and some of the funding models that we see in the contracts that we operate within dictate that some of the procurement routes into contracts perhaps are regularly rushed, and what that means is that the contractor has minimal time to plan and influence the design early enough to be able to be or to drive those efficiencies. So I'm a firm believer in that the more time that we have pre-contract, the better plan we can pull together, we can influence the design, we can collaborate, we can engage early, and you would see all those benefits sort of back end. But yeah, it's a constant battle.
From my perspective, you know, the Empire State Building is a fantastic example. When you get it right, you don't need to have the design completed, provided you've got the design completed in advance of the works, which is principally what they did. So you can manage design simultaneous with the construction. Having said that, we've moved into a world where we are trying to engage contractors earlier. We are trying to get the design better. We've gone down the stage of, as a UK, two-stage bidding, giving a lot more emphasis into the design. But unfortunately, quite often, the budgets for the projects aren't set at levels where we end up with a one attempt at getting it right. So we do something called value engineering, which is actually cost cutting. And we go back into redesigning elements of the work at last minute. And like everything else, the bulk design is there. The problem with most of our work in our industry is the interfaces. That's where we need to focus. If we start to standardize components, start to standardize designs where interfaces take place, then a lot of the aggro disappears.
Absolutely. Having asked for questions, we've now got far too many, but I'm going to go and pick the best ones. Quick one from Millen. He says, do you know how many people were injured or died during the construction of the Empire State Building? The official number was 14, I believe, although there's rumors it might have been higher than that. Obviously, not a good record for any construction projects, but yeah, an important distinction to draw. Obviously, our sites are much safer today. One that's coming from Nick Willoughby. How significant do you think prefabrication is in the future of skyscraper developments? Do you think, I'm going to make this more general, do you think prefabrication is a positive thing for the industry? Is that going to help us build faster? Anyone?
For somebody who used to have an off-site manufacturing business as part of the portfolio, I'm obviously going to say yes. Why wouldn't you bring components into site in a more completed state? It's safer, it's more efficient, but but having fully built buildings in that way, not going to happen completely. So we're going to still have the interfaces, and it's still going to be about what we do on the ground. So yeah, great question, but it's developing.
Actually, just to add an interesting little statistic to that, we had a project where they delivered some of the bathrooms traditionally and some were pods brought in prefabricated. They did that because they were trying to, as a company, test if it's worthwhile, and used data from Buildots, which is why I was involved, to just look at the differences, look at how many more return visits happened on apartments where they had to build a traditional bathroom. Did they take longer? Did they have more breaks in the process? And the overwhelming answer was yes. The overwhelming answer was that there was far more efficiency in those, this was student accommodation, in those rooms where they didn't have to build the bathrooms on site. And then they, I think, and I guess that's for my co-panelists here to answer, then they started saying, well, we need to identify the places where, or the parts of the build where that will happen to us on site and will be far more efficient off site, because their thoughts was, if I build the entire thing off site, then I might as well build the entire thing on site and just save me moving it around. But they are, as a company, and I'm pretty sure many companies do this, but maybe Andy could add, trying to understand what are the things that are the annoying bottleneck on site and to take those off.
Another question we've had is from Justin. I want to stay with you, Aviv, because it's from Justin, who's asked, what technology are you most excited about to drive building faster and better? I guess for you, it's around AI and measurability.
I think for us, obviously I'm excited about Buildots, but I think if it goes back to why we started Buildots, it was seeing people like Tom, and actually some of Tom's colleagues were the first construction people I saw in the UK. In this situation, in a meeting where somebody says, I did it, and somebody else says, I didn't. And I think that the moments that I'm most excited is when you hear construction professionals on site saying, my professional life is simpler because of technology, because I don't need to argue as much, because I don't need to worry about what's going to hit me tomorrow that I don't know about today. And no technology, not Buildots, not any other, will solve everything. But I think the role of technology is to both help the result and help the professionals along the way. And it's these things that are focused on site, on the delivery of the project itself, and the actual construction that excite me today.
Couldn't agree more.
Can I just add a bit to that?
Go for it.
Just very quickly. I see some phenomenal digital technology coming. The beauty of doing what I do now is that I get to focus a lot more on businesses that, as I say, are trying to improve the industry. It's a really, really exciting place. I've talked about skill shortage. these digital companies employ some incredibly clever people. I think as an industry, we've got a short window of opportunity to really embrace what they're bringing to the party. There's a challenge. They're not going to stick around if the industry doesn't want to adopt it. So I think we've got to really look hard at the business model and just say, these things are here to help us. And it is a mindset shift. It's not a challenge against how we do things today per se. It's there to help people. It's not to take people's roles away. It doesn't change a project manager's job. It just gives them tools to make their life more easy and better.
Well said. Very well. So there's the soundbite for social media afterwards. Thank you for that, Andy. Now we're going to have to wrap up your questions, guys. We've got some fantastic ones in here about regulatory changes, forms of contract, welfare, opposition to projects, planning. It's fantastic. You've absolutely lit up the Q&A. We're going to get as many answers of these over to you as we can afterwards. One to close us out with, this isn't a question, but it's a statement from Andrew Monroe, who said he got married at the top of the Empire State Building in September 1999, which is a lovely note to end the open Q&A on. I'm going to have one final question to Tom, Aviv, and Andy. I'm going to ask you guys the same question, and I've got one very special question for Carol at the end to close us out on the Empire State Building. So first of all, coming to you again, Andy. Sorry, you're so good at answering questions that we're going to start off with you. What's the one piece of advice you'd give to project teams listening who are looking to improve their productivity?
Embrace. Just go out and embrace what is available. Understand it's not challenging you. Understand that if you get the data and start to interpret it and understand what information that is giving you, it will help. That's it.
Aviv, what would you say? One piece of advice for a project team listening, desperate to improve productivity?
I think that my experience with bringing something like Buildots is that people need to be in the mindset that they are first looking to succeed and not looking to protect themselves from the possible failure and what will happen if that comes. So if you're in a mindset of, I will work together with my subcontractors, the smallest example is in my Buildots world is I will give my subcontractors access to this data, this very vast, very detailed data, despite the fact that there could be some point along the line, at some point later, a claim that they will have data now that maybe they don't have without it. But the other side of that is we are going to succeed together. And if we're in the mentality of we will succeed together, and we're more about working together than about challenging each other to make sure that if we don't succeed, it's not on me, then we will succeed.
Some absolute gems coming out of this question. Tom, I'm going to ask you the same question. One piece of advice you'd give.
Yeah, I think my answer links quite closely with Aviv's and Andy's in that a lot of people talk about collaboration, but actually to truly collaborate, not just with your supply chain, but with your consultant team, with your client team, with the wider stakeholders. I think that drives efficiencies, that drives productivity. And I don't think as an industry, we do enough of that.
I'm going to ask the three of you one quick yes or no question. It is strictly yes or no, right? You can't give any other words. Do you think we'll ever build a building as big as the Empire State Building as quick as that again? Tom?
No.
Aviv?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Okay. Carol, coming to you for our last question. At the start of your presentation, you said the Empire State was your favorite skyscraper. And for the founder of the Skyscraper Museum to say that that's their favorite skyscraper is a big deal. Why is it your favorite skyscraper?
Well, the Empire State was my favorite skyscraper before I started the Skyscraper Museum, as a matter of fact. So it goes way back. And I'm sitting in my apartment, unfortunately, not at the Skyscraper Museum, where I would love to show you the context. But from there, I have a magnificent view of the Empire State Building, looking from 23rd Street north to this solitary silhouette on the skyline. And as much as I understand it's an achievement in the history of construction and the history of skyscraper design, it's the romantic view of it that appeals to me, with its dignity, its energy, its representation of kind of American how-do spirit, as well as entrepreneurship. It kind of summarizes all those things with a great dignity and kind of magnificence on the skyline. So from both the rational and the romantic, it qualifies, I think, as not just my favorite skyscraper, but New York's signature skyscraper.
I could not have ended this with better words. Fantastic, Carol. Thank you so much for that summary. I want to say thank you to all our panelists today. I think we've, obviously, as you've guessed, this is a pretty big topic. There's some big issues here that make today's construction industry very different to when the Empire State Building was constructed, around legislation, supply chain, sustainability, health and safety, the amount of stakeholders involved. But that doesn't mean that we can't keep that goal of building as fast as the Empire State in our minds, and do really embrace some of the techniques and tools that the panel have talked about here to help us keep pushing on productivity and to make that step change. This discussion is going to be available online afterwards. If you want to forward it on to your friends, family or colleagues and get them to build as fast as the Empire State Building, please do. Also, some more information on Buildots available over on the b1m.com and across our social media as well. There's also going to be a link underneath this video when it's up on YouTube. I want to say a massive thank you to Buildots for sponsoring today and for enabling it to happen. And a huge thank you to all of our panelists, Aviv, Andy, Tom and Carol, in particular for Carol for getting us such fantastic access into that archive of imagery and artifacts on the Empire State Building. It was absolutely fascinating. Thank you for watching, guys. Thank you for tuning in and for your questions. As I said, we're going to get as many of those answers as we can afterwards on email. You gave me an easy task because you brought in lots of questions, so it was easy to pick from. But yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thank you to all our panelists, and we'll see you soon.